Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Delivering on the returns, increasing our margins.
Ratings go down the toilet if I'm not here.
All I do is simply put the math in my favor.
We agree that Brandon and John do good work.
The reason is simple wrestling economics.
I've been told the Netflix numbers. I've been told the metrics a little bit, probably 5 different times. I still don't get it.
There were respectable wrestling journalists who needed answers.
Thank you very much, members of the media. I hope you all go to hell.
How about we pop a number right here, right now?
Whole part of the show, man.
And welcome, everybody, to the March 26th edition of Pollock and Thurston. I am John Pollock alongside Brandon Thurston, where for the next hour we are going to be discussing all the latest in pro wrestling and pro boxing. Boxing has been revived, apparently, according to this TKO-backed bill that has passed the House of Representatives. What does this mean for TKO? What does this mean for the future of boxing? What does this mean for AEW? I mean, we will try and answer all of those questions on today's show.
Yes, we will.
So it's always fun. We have a bill to discuss, and John Nash will return to the show from the Hey Not the Face Substack and a podcast. He will be joining us in a little bit to talk about that topic. But Brandon, where are you joining us from tonight? I see a bit of an update to WrestleNomics HQ.
Yes, there's a new headquarters here. New headquarters has been established. New mortgage has been established. First time ever mortgage. We're no longer leasing. We are actually owned and operated now. And I spent the last 15 minutes or so assembling the books that people watching in video can now see behind me, which is always an important thing. I was thinking while I was silently loading these books into these bookcases, this is a post-pandemic phenomenon. This is a very important thing in the media world today. Whenever you appear on television, or in this case on our key partner, YouTube, it's really important that you have something behind you, usually books. I think the suggestion is that these books behind me have all been poured into my head, and I'm just full of all this knowledge now, when in fact I've read a handful of these books behind me.
Yep, that's what I try to convey with this UWF program from 1987 in Japan. All that has been acquired here. It's really just window dressing, but yes, it's well, congratulations on the move, and I am glad that you are all equipped to still join us here in virtual form.
Yes. We had movers come in here. They tried to get a couch in here. It didn't work. I'm thinking if there's any interesting stories that were involved in the move, other than the immense expense that I have endured. But I don't think so, not off the top of my head.
My worst moving story was when I had just graduated university, and I had been living with a bunch of people in an apartment, and then I got my own place that was like a few blocks away, and I only ended up staying at this place for a year. I was renting, and I just wanted to find a place quick, put down the rent, and then I moved in, and that evening I go to make a phone call, and I'm on like the 6th floor of this apartment complex. It's a little bit of an older building. It's surrounded by other apartments, and I realize I get no service on this floor in my apartment. And for a year, I had to go downstairs if I wanted to use my phone because I did not get cell service in this apartment. It was like blocked.
Was it made of like titanium?
I don't know what I was living in, but it was not cell phone compliant. Like the odd time I would get like one bar, but it was a little inconvenient. You should always check that you have phone service before you move into a place. So that is what like 21-year-old me learned. All right, moving on. This was an enlightening lesson that or Brandon's just wondering right now if he has cell phone service in his new place. But let us talk about a number of topics here before we are joined by our guest. All In London tickets went on sale last week. The official on sale was last Friday. This was preceded by a pre-sale, and the number we got from the good folks at WrestleTix, first estimate on Friday was 19,883 tickets distributed for the August 30th event at Wembley Stadium. This is their third time running at the stadium. The last time in 2024, the first estimate was 33,923. So a difference of about 41% from the last time. Is this a number that you put a lot of stock into, Brandon? Obviously, this is lower than the 2024 amount right out of the gate, but this is still a show that is 5 months away.
I'm searching for the number. What is this number again? That's the most recent tweet I can find here, and I'm probably not looking at the right place. What's the number again?
19,883.
Is this? I don't. That's fine. I guess it's more than you would put in an arena. I'm sure it's more than they had for Forbidden Door in London. So I would think that's it's got to be a lot more than you would put in an arena to justify running one of the biggest stadiums in the world.
Yeah, I think that it's, obviously 2024, I think, is the target you are aiming for. And I think what they have in their back pocket is, if this really picks up, what do you think in this day and age are going to be the factors that, whether it be a WrestleMania or an All In, what are the big factors? Are matches still of consequence that are going to have significant impact on tickets moving, or is this going to be more so just a scale of pricing and factors that go beyond just having a great card that you're building up toward?
I think what we've seen over the last 10 years or so is that, think about what are the biggest live events. I guess put aside the recent WrestleManias, but some of them have been not necessarily, wow, this huge match that was highly built up, or this huge individual drawing card. Hulk Hogan, Antonio Inoki showed up and drew this huge house. But I think there's been just, what's drawn huge has been novelty and history, especially, I guess, outside of WWE. So like All In 2018 was this, this sort of relatively small show compared to, I guess, what we're talking about here in terms of 10,000 people. But it was a landmark show that was drawn on whatever the specialness of that event was. You see,
it was pitched like a movement that you were supporting. Like, this is going to be this historical undertaking that you want to be part of, as opposed to any, no match that is selling this. It's more so the idea of this show was the big sell.
And then I think MSG with New Japan Ring of Honor was a historical event that people wanted to attend. To some degree, I would say WrestleMania 32 in 2016 as well. And then all in 2023. I don't think of those shows and think, wow, what was the big match on that show that drew the house? It was this, come to this show, you anticipate it's going to be a great show, yes, but it's also going to be a moment to experience history and be a part of it, literally attend history. And
historically, the biggest match took place backstage.
Of course. And you can't really book that, right? You just have to, you just have to sort of, by happenstance and maybe by doing, indirectly doing some good things, that ends up happening. So I think what's below that, though, clearly there's something to the hotness of your product in general, and the matches that you book as well. Of course, there's ticket prices, which are always an issue, especially when we're talking about WrestleMania. But I think, part of the reason why the last two WrestleManias have been as lucrative as they have been is because of the upturn in WWE's business. And I think when it comes to AEW, what's the trajectory of AEW's popularity? This zeitgeist, vague notion of popularity. I think it is on a mild increase, let's say, over the last year. And we're even seeing that somewhat in the Dynamite ratings, comparing this year, if you just lay it seasonally over last year. I think when we talk about ratings, which I think we're going to talk about somewhat today, they're slightly up.
Well, let's actually transition to that story next. And Nielsen is just I don't know how to categorize Nielsen right now. It's a stormy period right now for Nielsen. So
yes, indeed.
To backtrack, we had the introduction of Big Data plus panel last year, and this caused, of course, a lot of reverberations throughout professional wrestling programming. Then something called the Dash Survey was conducted and implemented by Nielsen this past January, and while we saw overall audiences increase. It was not so much that we were seeing big movement from like younger audiences, but generally wrestling was getting a bit of a bounce back effect. And so we frequently talk about the Nielsen Gauge Report, and the Gauge Report for February, which was a very big month, especially for ESPN, or sorry, not ESPN, for NBC's properties because of the Olympics, because of the Olympic Games. This was going to be a very big month for them. And so the Nielsen Gauge Report did not come out. And the Wall Street Journal reports that streaming TV's ascendance over broadcasting cable isn't as complete as it seemed. A report from the measurement firm Nielsen is set to suggest. And what it has found is that streaming has now, after surpassing that of the amount of viewing as compared to linear television, it seems like those numbers have now flipped. And with this data that Nielsen is using, streaming has come down. And basically, the Gauge Report, they put a pause on it for this month, and it's leaving all this unrest among people that rely on this data. And it's, just further complaints about Nielsen and how reliable of a arbiter of audience retention that this firm is at this point, when there's been a lot of criticism levied toward Nielsen that is trying to navigate this linear streaming divide and what the data is showing them. And I'm doing my best to break down this very complex story.
So if people are familiar with the Nielsen gauge, it looks like a donut, right? And we've talked about this before. It's got these great colors in it. And so my understanding is that here, for people watching video, we're looking at the January version. Mm-hmm. These usually come out about a month after, right? It's now March 26th. So we're due to have the February version out. The February version has not come out. It was originally supposed to come out, according to, I think it's Wall Street Journal, it was supposed to come out on March 17th. It's now March 26th. They've delayed it. And I understand Wall Street Journal is reporting in here what the numbers are for the February, and they're saying that the streaming is 42% or 41.9%, whereas just last month in January, it was 47%. So it's very unusual for this measurement to go down. And I just so happen to have a big chart out here that charts each month of the Nielsen gauge through the end of 2025. And of course, it's more often than not. This has been going on for 5 years. They've been putting out this chart every month, and it's a slow, steady decline of cable and broadcast, and it's a slow, steady increase of streaming. So streaming is almost always up, month to month. It's almost always up year over year. So this would be very unusual if streaming was down to that extent, to 6 percentage points. So I guess this is related somewhat to what we've experienced when we measure the wrestling ratings, is that they've put this new Dash study into the ratings. That has coincided with wrestling ratings in particular being repaired, rebounding after they were down, but that's also resulted in a lower measurement in the amount of streaming watching that Nielsen is doing. Mind you, when we talk about TV ratings, we're never including the streaming because Nielsen doesn't include that for reasons that are not totally clear to me. I guess it suggests that either one of two possibilities, right? Like either for years, at least, Nielsen's data was inaccurate, or now it's inaccurate. So which is it? Or there's always the third possibility. It's inaccurate now and then.
Well, I wasn't going to discount that possibility that they've been off the mark for all of these here. I mean, I can understand. Like, we probably talk about this to an annoying degree to some people, and I can imagine that most are just completely throwing Nielsen data out the window at this point when it comes to what do these numbers mean. The best way I think you can simplify this is that whether this is indicative of the exact audience that is watching a program, whether it is within 10%, whether it's within 20%, these are the numbers that these programs are basically tasked with going to the market with. And the problem in all of this is that the reason that advertisers are having faith in these numbers is because of the faith, the credibility that they have in a Nielsen. And if programmers are starting to it's one thing for programmers to say, hey, we're being undercounted here, but it's another when your advertisers are looking at this and it's the question of like, what is the audience we're actually reaching here? Because these are real dollars that we are assuming that we are reaching this amount of audience. Are we reaching this audience? And that's where this becomes difficult, because as advertisers, you want to know that what your spend is, like, what is the available reach here? And it's these wide variances, whether it's streaming or it's linear television. And that is this big hole that's being created in this market where Nielsen, for better or worse, and there's always been complaints about Nielsen, it was the accepted kind of gospel of television ratings data.
I mean, as far as being the currency, as far as I know, it still is. If you're an advertiser buying TV ads, you're probably still buying against whatever the demo. It's almost always a demo, right? It's not the total viewership. It's the demo that you're buying against. And as far as I know, that is the dominant currency that advertisers are buying against.
So, yeah, this Gauge report has been held up, and it's one where I think you have to find some kind of conclusion to the story, something that is going to satisfy these varying, programming outlets as well. And I don't know what like the easy solution to this is going to be for Nielsen, but it is something that obviously is going to need to be addressed for Nielsen moving forward, and to get the best representation of what these programs, like what audience they are attracting for people. And I think it's also worth looking, like, if you are taking this at face value, that pretty much across the board, these streamers, their audiences were down in February, that certainly would apply to wrestling programming that is on streaming as well. So it's like whatever boost we have seen, is that somewhat offset? Like, are they doing less viewership on streaming? But again, that's a theory. You don't have the data to support.
And like we said, I don't totally understand this. Like Nielsen, we know Nielsen measures, at least sort of on a type level, they measure what's cable broadcast versus streaming, and even this other category, which includes, I guess, video games, maybe people watching DVDs, all the people watching DVDs out there. And I don't understand exactly why, Nielsen, as far as we know, doesn't have a measurement for a given episode of Raw on Netflix. But nonetheless, they are telling us every single month, right, that, this percentage of watch time throughout the United States was Netflix, which, according to them in January, was 12.5%, somewhat lower, according to the Wall Street Journal, in February. So it's all, confusing to me, and I don't really understand why we haven't been able to aggregate simulcasts in particular, or even certain live programming of Netflix. Maybe that has something to do with the partnership or lack thereof between Netflix in particular and Nielsen. But it's one wonders if there would be competitors for Nielsen, and maybe they're having some difficulty mounting competition against Nielsen.
Do you think that if there was a competitor to spring up against Nielsen, would Ari Emanuel be making a phone call to anybody about such a startup?
If Ari Emanuel makes a phone call to anybody, I think that is going to be a quite possibly a decisive factor.
We'll get to that. Did you hear that Netflix is increasing its pricing yet again?
I do see that, for the second time in less than 2 years, according to Variety.
Yes, the standard plan with ads has now gone up $1 to $8.99 a month. The standard plan with no ads is rising by $2 from $17.99 a month to $19.99. And the premium plan, no ads, streaming on up to 4 devices, Ultra HD, HDR, is also going up from $2 from $24.99 to $26.99. This is just in the U.S., so we are not talking about the entirety of Netflix. But I mean, just don't hold your breath if you're a worldwide subscriber to Netflix. I mean, your price increase is coming.
Any new product, new technology, any new technology product, I think that is the scheme, right? Is let's charge way less than it's worth. We have a long-term plan here. And once we're a mature business, we'll really turn the price up. And you're going to be paying a lot more. It's not going to stop. It's not going to stop anytime soon. Monopoly or not, merging with WBD or not, the prices for all your streaming services are going to go up. And my generation's avoidance of cable TV is we're just postponing the inevitable in terms of rigid, high costs for watching television.
Well, I think they've found, that audience. It's like, we're going to rope you in with WWE. We're going to keep you with specials like Kill Tony WrestleMania that is now going to be available on Netflix 2 days after the event. I mean, for all those that only got the audio of last year's roast, this year you will get the audio and the video of Kill Tony WrestleMania.
I'm looking forward to the jokes he must be preparing. He must, I think he was saving up his jokes from last year regarding Paul Levesque. He's saving those for this year, I think.
Okay, well, look forward to it. What a hit that's going to be. NXT is also in the process. It's pretty much moved its library now from Peacock onto YouTube. They seem to be that is the new home for NXT. NXT's library is now on YouTube. You could go up there. They have put up all their past shows, all their past PLEs. They seem to that is where they are going to reside for the time being. And to go to the effort of just uploading all of this, I would think they're imagining they're going to be parking this here on YouTube for at least some time. It would not seem like anything is imminent if they were going to this length to move the library.
No, and I think with the PLEs as well, I imagine whatever money they're going to make through YouTube, even for a live stream or for this entire big library, it might just be rather competitive with what they could get, or with what they could get if they were actually licensing the library somewhere. Do we actually have episodes on YouTube of NXT that are
not the CW ones? Those are on
CW era. That's because they're
those.
On. Okay.
Yeah, those are on the CW app. But yeah, if you go here, I think they go up to when was it moved to CW 2023. I think it's pre going on to CW.
Move to CW was late 2024.
Oh, 2024. Okay, so
yes,
that would be the cutoff. So yeah, you have to have Netflix. You've got to have the CW app and
or an
YouTube.
antenna. You can have an antenna.
That's true. You could have that as well. Let's talk about this David Sahadi story. You just put this story up a couple of hours ago. You can read this at postwrestling.com. But the story came out earlier this week, and Brandon did a lot of additional reporting on it. So David Sahadi, people might remember, he has been a producer for pretty much all the major wrestling companies from WWE to TNA. He has done work with Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling. He's currently with Real American Freestyle. He was charged with stalking back in February by the Chattanooga Police Department. This according to court records from Hamilton County in Tennessee. And he entered into a stay-away order that was directed at him to stay away from the person that he is accused of stalking, who we are not identifying. And this led to an arrest on February the 10th. He was later released on bond. He denies any wrongdoing in the matter and has not been convicted in the case, which is still pending. And Sahadi did give us a statement stating, quote, that this matter began as a personal dispute between individuals who had known each other for years. This was not random criminal behavior, but a situation that escalated. What followed led to an unjust arrest based on allegations we believe to be false. And from that, Brandon was able to get details from the affidavit that gives the perspective of the person here who says that Sahadi stalked them, stating that Sahadi allegedly bothered the complainant at the place of their employment, as well as customers at the bar and restaurant in Chattanooga. The affidavit says that Sahadi was banned from the establishment, and it further alleges that Sahadi sent this person unsolicited emails, tried to contact them by sending text messages to coworkers, and they also say they didn't feel comfortable coming to work on days that Sahadi is known to frequent the establishment, and that the complainant had paid coworkers to cover their shift. And from that, Sahadi further stated that the complainant's allegations are false, unproven, and omit critical context. I did not engage in harassment, unsolicited communication, or any improper contact through coworkers at any time. These claims triggered both a ban and legal action, neither of which were supported by credible evidence as reflected in the case being dismissed prior to trial. I will pursue all appropriate legal remedies to address the damage caused by these misrepresentations. The truth will withstand scrutiny. These allegations did not. And in regards to the charges being dismissed at pretrial, this case is still ongoing, and the case could be dismissed, but that is still pending at this point, and he is not scheduled for another court date until March of next year. And part of this, if this is expunged from his record, it would be as a result of him adhering to this stay away order over this next year.
So basically, his statements characterize the charge in the past tense, or sort of make it suggest that the case has already been dismissed. However, I called the courthouse and asked what the status was of his case, which you can also verify through their case search online that the case does exist. But I asked what the status of his case was, and consistent with what is online on the court website, he has a next court date about just under 1 year from now. Basically, he has to stay away from the complainant and stay on good behavior. If that happens, the case could be dismissed at that point. If the case is dismissed, it could be expunged from his record, which means he would not have this charge on his record. So that could happen about a year from now.
Yes, and that's right. And I mean, David Sahadi has been in the news of late because his book had just come out actually pretty recently. So he has been doing several appearances and such when we learned of this earlier. And yeah, so the whole story is up there at postwrestling.com. And you can also read in full his statement to Post Wrestling, actually a series of statements that he gave us as well. So.
And according to him, he's preparing for a civil lawsuit against certain parties that are involved in this matter.
Yes. All right, let's go back to this Ari Emanuel story. So this came from the Wall Street Journal earlier this week, and people may have been following the Ticketmaster LiveNation antitrust case. Always fun to follow the antitrust cases. So the Wall Street Journal reports they focused on this individual, Mike Davis, who was on the Department of Justice, representing the Department of Justice in the antitrust case. Davis, while he denies the claims that are being made here by the Wall Street Journal, they state that Davis pushed antitrust officials at the Justice Department to approve his deals and went over their heads when they wouldn't comply. So, in essence here, to break down, how does all of this tie together? During the Biden administration, the Justice Department sued to break up LiveNation and Ticketmaster, alleging that the company drove up ticket prices for fans and suppressed competition. And then after Donald Trump was elected president, LiveNation hired Davis to advise on the Justice Department case. And then it was reported that Trump heard about the LiveNation case from friends, including Hollywood talent agent and former LiveNation board member Ari Emanuel, who told the president it should be settled, according to people familiar with the conversations. After the trial began in March, Trump began calling around to ask why it hadn't been settled. What's the holdup? He wanted to know, according to people familiar with the matter. It was an extraordinary role for a president to play in a routine antitrust investigation. Both sides met at the White House March 5th, and 4 days later, the Justice Department and LiveNation announced a tentative agreement that would allow the company to avoid a breakup. The deal did not include venue divestitures, but the company agreed to divest 13 exclusive booking agreements with amphitheaters and to open its amphitheaters to all promoters. And like that, this antitrust case looks to be going away. So maybe Ari was just calling up Donald Trump, and it just happened to come up in conversation. Like, hey, are you aware of this case? I think it's gone about as far as it needs to.
Maybe they're just talking about America's 250th birthday. When it says amphitheater, does it literally mean amphitheater? I guess let's establish for the consumer. I think in the UK, it's branded LiveNation. The online ticketing vendor is. In the US, in Canada, we have Ticketmaster generally, I think. But those two companies merged at some point in the past, right? And there's this lawsuit was about whether LiveNation was going to have to break up.
Correct.
This is kind of stemming from the energy around with the Taylor Swift tours and how hard those tickets were to get, and things like that, right? But when it says amphitheaters, I mean, my understanding is there's stadiums, for that matter, and arenas that are mostly Ticketmaster venues, and they only do business with Ticketmaster. When I see amphitheaters here, I'm thinking theaters, where maybe concerts are happening, things like that, not necessarily sports venues.
Right. Yes. That's how I would read it.
Yeah. So I don't know that this settlement that they did make is going to cause that much relief for, let's say, ticket buyers of major sporting events.
Oh, no, I don't think that is going to have any. I mean, this seems to be like a very bare bones settlement agreement in terms of like what the intent was when the Justice Department sued here, of the idea that here is a ticket distributor and a concert venue promoter that are kind of vertically aligned here, and it is you, the consumer, that is getting squeezed by this, where it is, the ticketing side is also part of the venue side of, like, you want to play this venue, you have got to go through Ticketmaster, and it's got this this hold on its ability to price where it is. And how does this relate, as we always talk about, like, this is the balance between this, that tickets for sporting events, for concerts, they have skyrocketed, and with that, it has, it's
people want experiences. People want to go out and do things. That's what Mark Shapiro says,
and he's not wrong. He's not wrong, and you can certainly have the perspective that, yeah, there's a segment of the audience that is totally priced out of these, and that's fair, but there is an audience that is willing to spend this money for a lot of these events. And are these companies these are publicly traded companies that are simply like, does the demand support these prices? And generally we're seeing they are supporting this demand as high as it is, and catering to maybe the top 20% of their fan base that is willing to spend so much money, and the other 80% are kind of, this is above their ability to attend these shows. But it is not like these companies are struggling with these prices. And is this just a reflection of the demand that's out there? And also trying to, like, the fact is, of, if you were to sell a ticket at $100 face value, and on the secondary market, they're going to make $300. It's like these promoters are like, well, why don't we make the $300 before they can on the secondary market? That's the other aspect to this, is that these tickets are going for this amount anyway. It should be us that recoups this revenue, and not the secondary vendors.
And I would suggest that dynamic pricing is not very consumer friendly either, which is, I mean, evidently happening here, right? If there's heightened demand, or if it's very easy to change your pricing as time goes on here for these promoters to make the most money possible, mitigating that would require regulation. We don't really do that in the United States much. So it's sort of creating a world that's more and more for people who have a lot of money, and especially for the companies who collect the money.
There's always a fear we're running out of categories, and then we pull out dude wipes. I mean, there's no end to the opportunity here. We own men with these sports.
They've got a monopoly on men. That is TKO for you. So I would love to. I wonder if I'm sure this was a phone call that Ari Emanuel made. I'm sure this was not on Langus with Donald Trump.
I don't know if Donald Trump is using Langus.
That would be my guess. Is probably not at all. It seems like Donald Trump, very accessible. I mean, you can say a lot about the man. Very accessible.
Yes, I've never tried to reach out, but I'm sure he would take the call.
Yes. Well, I would be curious. Just a cold call one day, and odds are the man will pick up. Okay. Before we get to John Nash, let us talk a little bit about some ratings notes. As valuable as they are these days, we go back, and Impact last week was slightly down from their record the week before, but still very healthy at 250,000 viewers and a .04 on AMC last week. And this would be, I think, their third highest number on AMC. Certainly above, I think, what people expected. Their lowest was like their first week, and it's stayed at a healthy level for Impact. We will see what this means when they hold their first significant pay-per-view next month after the AMC, like a full cycle on
remember,
AMC.
These first two episodes are in the phase 1 of Big Data Plus panel.
That's
and
true.
Then everything after is after the Dash study gets included in the methodology.
Well, that's
for those playing at home.
They're rooting for the Dash survey. I think they're very much on that side of things. SmackDown on Friday. This featured 1,439,000 viewers, 0.32 in the demo. So this was going up against March Madness, as is pretty much all wrestling programming at this particular point. So that is where SmackDown landed here. A very competitive night, but strong number. So, like SmackDown, it certainly has done very well post January 26th.
It has, and it's really this crater like from 2 weeks ago for the Drew McIntyre versus Cody match that just is odd. You'd have this big promoted match, and it's the thing that coincided with their dip in the ratings.
Randy Orton to the rescue. Do a bloody angle. Randy Orton, try and turn him heel. You can't turn him heel, and maybe they were right. They went with the superior matchup for WrestleMania.
Yes.
Collision was broken up over 2 nights. Can't break up LiveNation and Ticketmaster, but you can break up Collision on Slam Dunk Saturday and Slam Dunk Sunday. So they got the lead-in from the March Madness games, and it resulted in 469,000 viewers on Saturday night show with a .10 in the demo. And then Sunday night, this is like 11:30 at night on a Sunday, and they get 616,000 viewers and a .12 in the demo. I would imagine heavily weighted towards the first quarter, but like especially Sunday. But a great number for Collision. Like this is Dynamite's not coming close to a number like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it'd be interesting to see the quarter hours or to look at what these telecasts right before did. But it's it's one of these occasions, and there have been I think after an NBA All-Star game in the past where they're going to have a lot of viewers early on in this telecast, but not later. It's probably a really smart idea to break this up into these single-hour telecasts on different nights, so that you're going to average a much better 2 hours than if you just picked either of these nights and ran for 2 hours from there, right? Because there's less time for the casual basketball audience to go away.
Yeah, maybe they made some fans on Sunday night. Maybe some fans discovering Leo Rush's new character. I mean, there's all these.
Yes, this was this dude. There he is. This did fairly well on YouTube. This clip of Leo Rush versus Tommaso Ciampa.
Yeah, I believe this is real, but he posted a photo that he's gotten his like skull like tattooed. Not quite Bam Bam Bigelow level, but not that far off either. So I mean, he's man is committed at this point, barring that this is a real tattoo. So I reserve the right to be corrected.
Okay.
So there you go. Strong numbers for Collision. And then we just got the NXT number about an hour or so ago. 581,000 viewers and a .08. This was lower in viewership slightly from the week before, but did grow in 18 to 49. It should be noted the last 2 weeks they had been preempted in Chicago. Not the case this week, but this is kind of the standard range for NXT. You don't really see the much difference here for NXT. It's very rare that it's kind of just settled into this general range on Tuesdays.
And it's interesting to look at a lot of these programs, including NXT, and to look at the total viewership, which is, if you're watching video, the blue line is the current year, and the gray line is 2 years ago. They're basically right on par with where they were 2 years ago, which is at that point they're still on the USA Network. But the gap for the demo is much lower.
And then we also had the Netflix number for last week's Raw. We'll finish off there. So the March 16th edition of Raw did 3 million views and 5.9 million hours viewed. So this ranked 8th on the global top 10 chart, number 3 in the U.S., very high on the U.S. chart, number 4 in Canada, among the 19 countries where it ranked, which also included the UK, India, Saudi Arabia, Australia, all the regular haunts, Bolivia, of course. So there you have Raw, which I guess kind of justifies the price increase that they were ready after this point. Let's get more out of the wrestling fans. We're about 14 months into this experiment, and also today I've not listened to this. I don't know if I will be, but did you see who Stephanie McMahon's latest guest is on her podcast?
I did not.
Bella Bajaria.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Right. So a fellow WWE champion.
That's true. Yes. I don't think she was wearing her belt for said interview, but I'm sure there was a nice 1 hour hard hitting Netflix deconstruction talking about the failed bid for WBD.
Yeah.
What else could they be discussing? Maybe
talking about Ted's appearance before the U.S. Senate.
Yes. Are you maybe a land acknowledgement at the beginning of this, or
yeah? What
else would he be accused of? So there you have it.
So it's this raw data, right? We're now more than a year in here. If you believe the data, and we could look at the attendance data that I've got in this report too. Now the attendance Q1's almost over, by the way. We're almost at the end of March. So we've got a quarter. You know, the vibes probably among people listening to this is that WWE is on a moderate or mild downswing in terms of general popularity, right? That's what's in the atmosphere, I think. Attendance is slightly down from the same quarter of the prior year. We got Raw averaging 11,500 compared to 13,600 in the prior year. But if you look at this Raw data, and it's basically, I mean, of course, this premiere is huge from 2025, and that messes up the year-over-year average on the whole. But if you look at this week to week, just laying 1 year over top of the other, I mean, this is virtually the same.
There has not been it's a pretty straight line when it comes to the audience. And I think you look at this and, it's typically among their, it's a consistently ranked show for Netflix every single week. It just, outside of those weeks where we got Stranger Things just dominated their chart, they're always there in your top 10. By the standards of they just got $2.8 billion falling out of the sky because this WBD deal did not go through. So it's for what they are paying for Raw, it's the equivalent of a handful of movies for them that they are spending for 52 weeks of programming every single week. And it has its audience. Is this at the level that they were hopeful of? I mean, that would be a question for them. It would, all of their other behavior when it comes to events suggests that they are not looking for anything that would be of this nature, where it's weekly programming. They are not looking at starting an MMA promotion. They're looking at this one big night of stars that are going to fight, or they're looking for a big comedy special, or they're looking for a hot dog eating contest. And even for Major League Baseball, they didn't get a whole slate of games. They got opening night, they got the home run derby, and they got that Field of Dreams game. They got 3 big baseball events that they're looking for, as opposed to the right weekly baseball. That it seems like
hot dog eating contest.
They did do one of those back in 2024. I don't know
Nathan's
if they.
Hot dog eating contest?
I think it was the Nathan's hot
was
dog
Mike
eating
White
contest.
Ronnie there?
I don't know. I can't. I will pledge that I did not, in fact, watch the hot dog eating contest. But you look at all these different, like all their boxing events, for instance. Like I don't think they were not out there bidding for Top Rank or for Golden Boy. They want specialty fights to promote. So it's like all their other activities are counter to this WWE strategy that they went with. And I maintain, like, would they have been more happy to have had just the monthly events versus weekly programming? But I mean, maybe they feel like this serves a certain kind of audience, and it is our weekly programming, and it's kind of entertainment, it's kind of sport, it's on that bubble for us, and like it does have an audience. But I mean, it would be curious to look at like how they view internally this WWE experiment, and like the closest they have to weekly sports, as much as you want to define this as pseudo sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's ranking almost every week. A handful. And often when it hasn't ranked, it's because it's been pushed out by something that has extremely high viewership, like Stranger Things. Are we going to be joined by our guest tonight?
I don't know if the people behind AAA have gotten to our guest or not. I have put out a message here, but we can still talk a little bit about this Muhammad Ali revival.
If you want to kill some more time, I can tell people that I have in the shareholder lawsuit that we've been covering. I did submit today, and the clerk did accept my filing. Let's get into the minutiae since we have a little bit of time.
Let's do it.
So as people may know, I submitted a notice of challenge in December, which has led to a lot of records, court records, filings in the WWE merger shareholder lawsuit. Those being either unsealed or having the redactions removed. You can only challenge filings that have already been filed, and that was filed on December 9th. So a lot of time has passed here, and many more sealed filings and redacted filings have been filed since that time. So I've filed another round of this, but not before I had to go through some administrative jump through some administrative hoops. The Delaware Court of Chancery clerk notified me that when I first submitted this, I needed to, apparently I should have done this in the first place, I needed to submit an affidavit, a pro se e-filer affidavit, which you can't just sign and submit. Oh no, you have to get it notarized by a notary public. Do you have notary publics in Canada?
I might get corrected. I've never encountered one, but I don't want to deny their existence. The amount of like legal hurdles that you have the patience for is astounding.
But I cannot be stopped. I went to the nearest bank like that
today.
And I said, I printed the affidavit out, which is not the file they were showing on the screen now. It's just a basic form, and I had to sign it, and I got somebody at the bank. I don't know how one becomes a notary public. I think it's a secret process, but I did get it notarized, and lo and behold, boom, got it refiled today, and it's there. So quite a few filings are being challenged here.
Okay, well, it's the plot thickens, and at least you've cleared that. So we will keep everyone updated on the ongoing shareholder lawsuit, which, again, the countdown is now on, okay? Forget WrestleMania, forget All In. The big date is June. We don't have an official date. It's just June, correct?
Oh, we do have a date.
We do have a date.
If you stand by, I can tell you what that date is for the trial. If I can find my calendar. It's I want to say June 11th or 12th. It is, if it'll load. There we go. The 8th, the 9th, the 10th, not the 11th, which is a Thursday, but then the 12th. So it's a week from, it's the second week of June, you could say.
Okay. Well, it's you might have to live stream from there, Brandon.
Well, not without the court's permission.
Of course not.
Careful now.
All right, let's so we're gonna move ahead here to talk a little bit about this Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. So we have talked about the Revival Act in the past. This, of course, was introduced last year by it's a bipartisan bill. It was introduced by both Republican and Democratic members of Congress, and of course is heavily backed by TKO that has advocated for this bill, and it has gone through adjustments and changes along the way, but the core of the bill is that it is going to allow boxing promoters to work outside of the existing Muhammad Ali Act and would create them under the label of a Unified Boxing Organization, or a UBO, which would put them into a separate lane where they do not have to work under the guidelines of the Muhammad Ali Act, nor with the existing sanctioning bodies. Think of this as something closer to the UFC model, where they could control their championships, they can control their rankings, and the contracts can have some restrictions in them, nor do the promoters have to disclose financial information to their fighters as they do under the Muhammad Ali Act. Those would be the big negatives that people are concerned about.
From reading about this, my takeaway is that when you see UBO, which is a new type of entity that this law will create,
which is what TKO would be classified as. Yes,
the Unified Boxing Organization, Zuffa Boxing, correct, is what they'll call their brand. When you see UBO, just think UFC, but boxing. UFC, but boxing. That should have been the name of this company. So that is, now there are some elements here. There is going to be a minimum amount that boxers will make per round. There's going to be new minimums when it comes to health coverage. There's going to be certain aspects looking at drug testing. I mean, it's not like everything is a negative in this, but I think everyone looks at just several generations of fighters from the UFC, and like, we have the template here. And it seems to be this idea that, well, there's no way that this could happen to boxing. And one of the big talking points is that, well, you have a choice. You can be part of a UBO, or you can just stay and operate under the Ali Act. The issue becomes like the further influence, and when TKO has the backing of Sela, which is the Saudi Arabian group, and has the ability to go after all of these fighters, well, it's going to become like, you want the biggest fights and some of the biggest purses. Is Zuffa Boxing going to be that place that you are going to have to go to get the biggest fights? And it's going to be their goal to prop up their championships and to be able to, they have this huge deal with Paramount. That's around $100 million a year right out of the gate that they have secured as well. And you have this is a powerful group of people that you have behind them, from your Nick Khans and Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh. And there is the belief of what these other promoters are going to be able to, how much of their business is this going to change? And one of the questions is if some of these other promoters, what is their incentive to stay under the Ali Act? This is, I think you can look at the UFC. It's a tremendous business if you are on the management executive side of that equation. Not so much if you're on the fighter side, where you are really at the mercy of these extremely restrictive contracts that you can be stuck in for years, and that's going to apply to boxing as well. So what are the key differences here? If under the current Ali Act, which is about to be amended, it sounds like, I get to know what other boxers are getting paid, correct?
You have to disclose that under the Ali Act. Fighters have to be able to know what is the broadcast revenue, what is the ticket information, what is the gate figures. You have to, you're almost a partner with that boxer. There's also not the, I can't sign you, Brandon Thurston, as a 3-0 fighter to a 12-fight contract, and it's you become a champion at fight number 5, and I've got you under all of these fights. It's you have the ability that you can't have these extensive lengths to contracts, and therefore you are somebody that, okay, I signed you at 3-0, and then you become a big star. You get to go out to the market and go to the highest bidder, and that is the promoters are the ones that are going for your services. Under these deals, you can have a fighter typically under a term of 6 years, which for a boxer, that's a significant amount of time. 6 years is a significant portion of your career to be under what would be like one contract.
So more restrictive contracts. If I'm a UBO, I can sign fighters to longer, more restrictive contracts to keep them under my control longer. I also don't have to disclose fighter pay and other business information.
You don't need to know any of that stuff. Just trust us.
Yeah, that's what I always say. But so it sounds like, assuming this law is approved, which sounds like it will be, but there's those two different types of entities, the UBO and I don't know what to call the other thing, the current type of boxing organization. Those things are still both going to be allowed to exist simultaneously.
Yes.
But maybe the current type of boxing organization will not be as successful because this UBO, and particularly obviously TKO, Zuffa Boxing, is going to be a UBO. They're going to perhaps dominate the market.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to come out of like, you know, what, like this recent boxer that they signed, Conor Benn, to reportedly like a $15 million deal. I mean, that's
the Saudis are paying for it. Don't worry, the Saudis are paying for it.
I mean, Mark Shapiro was very quick to alert, hey, we're not spending this money. But like, if you're telling the market like a Conor Benn, he's a fine fighter, but for $15 million is like, that is telling us like we are going to spend as much as we need, and it's going to lure a lot of the fighters over if that's the type of money that you're offering to a Conor Benn, of what kind of contracts you're going to be offering. That is going to sway a lot of the influential fighters to come to Zuffa Boxing. And once you get a core of the biggest fighters, like that's where people are going to want to go, because they're going to want to fight the biggest fighters. And it's going to be, you know, a case of TKO being able to kind of bolster its cards and make it a attractive place that it wants boxers to be. But it does allow for boxers at least to, like, it does seem like this week, just based on seeing from a lot of fighters, like this reality is coming to fruition. Like, it seems a lot were either just not paying attention to this or thinking like, this won't go through. And no, this week was that wake up call. Like, no, this is basically like, it would take a miracle that this is not going to pass through the Senate and then it just gets signed into law. And that could be a very quick process.
So is there any argument that that a UBO will be better for the boxing fan in terms of, like, I don't know, like, what is the counterparty to let's say Zuffa Boxing? Are we talking about promoters? Promotions?
We are, and that's one of
who are those? Who like, name a promoter?
So other promoters, like you have like Top Rank, you have Matchroom Boxing, which is run by Eddie Hearn. You have Golden Boy.
And they're not going to be UBOs. Do we know? Like, are there any signals?
So it's interesting because, like, again, and this is something I would want to lean on someone with like more in the weeds with boxing. But like, if I'm just Top Rank, for instance, like, would it be attractive for me to become a UBO? Like, there are certain thresholds I would have to meet to qualify to be a UBO, but I could have, like, it comes with a lot of power if you're a promoter to become a UBO. And in theory, there is nothing stopping me, but you do have to be able to qualify, like things like having a training center, for instance, which is not like a cheap undertaking, but it's very much catered towards TKO, that they have something like the UFC Apex, that, you know, a training facility. How many of these promoters are investing in, you know, these kinds of things that would qualify to become a UBO as well? But no, in theory, it's not like these other promoters, if they chose to, could not themselves become UBOs as well. And it, like, the big losers here are going to be the sanctioning bodies, that I think are going to be, I think a lot of people are like, it's a very mismanaged system. And if these promoters don't have some loyalty to fighting for the WBC belt, like if that prestige is not there, like fighting for the belt that Muhammad Ali held, you might have a lot of them that are just like, I don't want to deal with these sanctioning fees and working with these sanctioning bodies that are just more of a restriction to us than an asset.
All right, for the fan, is there a chance that this is going to create a more centralized, single leading dominant boxing league, which could put a greater concentration of the best fighters under a single umbrella, under a single card, thereby creating something like UFC in terms of these recurring super fights.
Right.
And I guess to me, it seems like the current state of boxing for decades has been quite fragmented.
Yeah, and like that has always been something about like the UFC. If you are just a fan of watching the biggest fighters compete against one another, and you don't like you tune in Saturday night and you're not really attached to like, okay, this guy's I don't really have a stake in how well this guy's being compensated for my entertainment. The UFC can be really an attractive model because they have the lion's share of the best fighters in the world. I'd say they've certainly run into this like as they are somewhat held back by their own kind of cap on what they're going to spend on fighters. They are not putting together the best fights at the moment, but that is kind of a new issue that they have been dealing with. But historically, like they've had access to like 90% of the best fighters and it's all under one roof, and they've been able to they can just match these fighters who have very little negotiating leverage, and therefore the promoter can control this. And if you're a fan, you just want to see the best fights. And if one person controls everybody, it's not all that dissimilar to the pro wrestling model, where for years it was WWE and they had access to a lot of the biggest stars. And therefore, like if you're a wrestling fan, and we have lived through it, like we see the good and the bad of like one really centralized company that has the lion's share of the audience and the lion's share of the biggest stars.
Yeah, I guess my theory is always that in wrestling, yes, there is, even though there wasn't for about 20 years, well, there's TNA, is that wrestling is like a sport, but it's of course not like a sport in a lot of ways, and therefore that translates to there being room for two companies, as well as a lot of other factors that where it sort of straddles that space, and its economic effects straddle that space as well. I guess when it comes to more legitimate sports, though, if I think of the major, let's rule out soccer here, because there's like, as far as I know, like 8 different major leagues of soccer. But think of there's the NFL, and there's everything else is quite minor. I mean, imagine if there was the USFL and the NFL, it would sort of fragment where the best players are, and on down the line in the major team sports. It seems like if you're a fan, now you could separate. Look, are these participants being getting a fair bargain or getting the best deal that they can is a separate issue. But I think there is a question of like, well, is this a league that concentrates all of the best participants and athletes so that they can create the highest level of competition?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that argument that like for you just as the consumer, like what you want out of a sport, like you want to see the best compete with the best on a regular basis. Now having one dominant entity is they can also very much control like the price. Like you want a UFC pay-per-view and they can charge whatever they want here. Does like look at what the impact has been for like just the rise of an AEW, where it's greatly enhanced like the floor for a lot of like WWE performers of what they're making. Like we have heard all these stories of talents that basically we tore up their contract and gave them a new contract just so they would not leave. Now that's not really trickling down to the viewer itself, but you know, you could certainly look at, was WWE in the long run a company that benefited from having a strong competitor? And it certainly was not the only factor that led to a turnaround in business, but I would certainly qualify it as a factor in a company turnaround that was sort of in cruise control for many, many years.
I mean, I would suggest the main thing that turned WWE around was the scandal around Vince and his removal from the creative process, and whatever, additional layered on top of that perception that comes with that. And I think, I think like if you still had Vince there, would WWE be doing better? Or would they have had that I think there was this 2020, 2021 slight turnaround. We're getting into a different topic here. Slight turnaround with the coinciding with the timing of PLEs going to Peacock. But I digress. Yeah.
They did have, I mean, you certainly started to see a bit of that spark with like Cody coming over, and I mean, no AEW, that is, you know, if there's no AEW, like a Cody Rhodes going back to WWE is probably not the impact of, like it just is not that level of impact. Like Vince is the number one reason that you would assign to this, but there was also sort of this an ability for this company to benefit off of stars elsewhere, especially in the Cody Rhodes situation, and also somebody that had, I think a creative direction as well, that they were, I think, being forced to really, get away from a pat hand that they had run with for so many years, that your audience had just been, I mean, I think you put it well, was like, we found out there was a lot of audience that didn't so much want an alternative, they just wanted a better WWE and then once they got it.
Jesse Collins.
Was that Jesse? Well, it was appropriate. Like it was, it was always the thought was just having an alternative. And as I think we've seen it bear out, that there were many disenfranchised WWE fans that just wanted their home team to put a winning product on the field.
I mean, I would suggest it's the Major League of Wrestling. It's this thing that is, by far the biggest. And if you made it more enjoyable to watch, there are more people who are engaging a little bit, who are willing to engage substantially more if it was better.
So to conclude, the bill will now go to the Senate floor. It's going to be sent to the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. The head of that committee, Ted Cruz. We will see if this makes it to the desk of President Donald Trump, and maybe he has thoughts on the UBO model, and maybe he is going to have to deliberate before signing this into law, but we will find out. Final thing, Brandon, where were you on this date in 2001, the night of the final edition of Monday Nitro?
I was taping WCW Nitro in my, what year was that for me? I was in 10th grade. I was 15 years old at the time. 15, 16 years old? No, 15. Because I was not. Yeah, I was 15 years old at the time. I taped it. I remember. I was spellbound by, this moment in wrestling history.
The big simulcast, the arrival of Shane McMahon in Panama Beach, Florida, and little did we know what the future of pro wrestling would be. It was quite the quite a seismic event for like just the overall health of pro wrestling, which would take pretty much decades to fully recover from.
Yes, and I feel like there's been these sort of spiritual successors to the companies that existed at the time, which were, I think WCW was reincarnated as TNA, and it had a lot of other attempts to, like XWF and things like that.
Main Event Championship Wrestling. I mean, there were some great offshoots.
And ECW was in some ways reincarnated as Ring of Honor.
I think ECW was attempted by many failed promoters after the fact of trying to rekindle ECW. But yes, it was I watched both shows were on at a bar that we would go to in downtown Toronto that wrestling fans would get together with on a Monday night, and we had Nitro on one screen, Raw on the other, and then for the first time ever, the screens converged for the final 15 minutes of Nitro.
That's right.
Yes. All right, everybody. We apologize about John Nash. His whereabouts are unknown. We apologize that we weren't able to connect with Mr. Nash, but hopefully enjoyed our discussion about the Ali Boxing Revival Act. And you can go read. John Nash did do a really lengthy piece on the Uncrowned site, kind of going through. I believe it's called that the Ali Revival Act is the worst of both boxing and MMA. So you can go see his extensive breakdown of the Revival Act, and maybe we will reconnect with him in the future. As well, you can catch all of Brendan's latest work, both at WrestleNomics.com and PostWrestling.com. He just put up the report tonight on David Sahadi, and more to come as well. You can support WrestleNomics at Patreon.com/WrestleNomics for ratings analysis and all of Brandon's work that can be found there.
Yes. I'm sorry about the audio issues we're having here, but of course, the audio podcast version of this will be corrected.
Okay. I didn't know we were having audio issues, but we do apologize. That's going to wrap up the show. So thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll be back here next Thursday, 8:30 Eastern. And until then, have a great Thursday night.